Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to Nature of the Business Podcast, episode 4. And we're back again with another one. And I'm David.
And this is Monique.
Great to have you back. Today we're going to be talking about something that's core to YGN, core to our DNA, which is our factory. As you probably already know, YGN, we make all of our product in-house. We are in Dallas, Texas. We are a made in the USA company, and we're really proud of it. It's really helped us as a brand to drive product development, and at the same time, it has nuances and can bring complications. Today, we're going to pull back the covers on what it's like to run our factory. Monique, anything else you want to talk about today?
Gosh, the factory is a story in itself, so I think that's gonna take it all.
Why don't we start at the very beginning? We talked on episode 1 about the YGN origin story, but why don't you tell everyone here what made you decide to make the product yourself? Now there's, you can offshore, you can make product in China. What made you decide to make the product yourself?
Well, believe it or not, making products in an outsourced way, like offshoring it or hiring a designer, that's actually like not an easy process. So making the product myself, because I did already know how to use a sewing machine, was the easiest way to do it. When I was starting out, I had no money. I had some scraps from my mom's closet and a $40 sewing machine. And so I didn't have money to hire a designer. I didn't have money to get samples. I didn't have money to, do tech packs and all the different things that you have to do to properly go through the manufacturing process. And so making it myself was the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. And how did you already know how to sew? How did you learn how to sew? Where did you learn how to sew?
So, my mom taught me how to sew when I was 3. She used to sew a lot when we were little, and she would sit, because I was the youngest, I was the baby, so I would sit down next to her at the sewing machine, and now I'm thinking back, she was probably just trying to keep me busy. She would cut out a piece of fabric the shape of a doll dress and teach me how to sew the pieces of the dress together, and that would keep me busy. And then after a while, I got older and I wanted to do things myself. I would steal her sewing patterns out her drawer and find a piece of fabric and try to do those things myself. I've always been like a crafty type of person. So, but it started with those days when she was sewing and I was sewing next to her.
Yeah. So it sounds like you always had this, kind of like this kind of creative kindle of, sewing. But generally, kind of a creative bend to how you approach things.
Yeah, for sure, with everything.
When you created the first head wrap, were there different iterations of it, or was it you had the idea and you sewed it, or did you have to iterate on that first head wrap that you made?
Yeah, I mean, we started, I'm trying to think, the original head wrap was based on a traditional West African style head wrap. So that was like a stiff cotton-like fabric that didn't come pre-tied or satin lined, that you just fold and wrap. So I kind of knew what the base should look like. And so I based the design of our original pre-tied head wraps on that. So it really was really simple design. It was a rectangle piece of fabric, just like a head wrap would be. And I put satin on the back of it and I tied it and stitched it in place.
Got it. So it was literally, as that was kind of what initially where you called them, and they still are today, pre-tied head wraps. You literally just kind of made a traditional wrap. You put satin on one side and then you tied it. And then you had to make sure it stayed in place. So you just stitched that together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the process of, okay, I feel like this is good. Let me see if I can sell it.
Really, I started with a few different designs because head wraps can be tied in a few different ways. So I started with a few different ones. I picked one that I liked, and I posted this video of myself putting it on Instagram. And I put it up there. I just literally, the caption was, "Would you buy this if if I sold it? Like, would you want to have this? And like 3 or 4 people had commented yes, right? And this was maybe like, I started in September. This was maybe like February of that year, right? I kind of was still mulling it over. And then a few months later, there were people still asking, like, are you selling this, selling this yet? And so I went ahead and put up a website. I put up a Shopify site, and I just put them up there, and I forgot about it. And then like a couple weeks later, I got some emails saying, hey, where's my order? And I was like, oh, wait, people are ordering these things? So that's how that process was. It really was just like testing the waters when I first started, but kind of immediately. I mean, I've started other websites before and haven't gotten any sales at all. And it was like really weird that right at the beginning, people were waiting at the door to buy these.
Mm-hmm. That's I think that's such a great story, is that from day zero, customers have been saying, hey, I want the thing that you're making. And for entrepreneurs out there, it's such an important element of driving your business forward. If you start with not creating for anyone in mind, or you just start with, I want to make a bunch of money, it ends up not being as inspired as if it's something that you think is genuinely interesting and cool, that it attracts people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. The biggest thing when people ask me, how do I get started? And I'm like, the first question is, what problem are you solving? Because if you just start and you're like, okay, I'm going to sell t-shirts. Okay, what problem does your t-shirt like? Who is going to be inspired to buy this from you? And so it's really important to make sure that you're speaking to someone and you're solving someone's problem.
Yeah. So we kind of put these up. We get our first orders. Then what do you do?
So when I got the first orders, let's actually back up to the fact that I was making these to order. So when people place the order, the plan was, okay, I get the order, I'll sit down at my machine and I'll make one and I'll ship it to them. So that's exactly what I did. I got those orders. Really at that time, I think this is the funniest part of how we started, was that it was like, okay, pick your color, then pick your style. So it was really a custom wrap, and I had 12 colors and like 8 different styles. And I didn't think about how complicated that would be to track and produce once it started growing. And so they picked their color, they picked their style, and I sat down at my machine, I made them. I used to pack them on these styrofoam heads in these big boxes. And I would ship them out. And that's what I did. I did
you
them.
Ship the styrofoam head in the box?
In the no concept of like, hey, what if someone buys more than one? Like, hey,
right.
What if you have a repeat customer and they don't want all these styrofoam heads in their house? Like, there was just no thought of like what happens if this actually grows out.
Yeah. That's a balance between being an entrepreneur, what you would like and you think is like the most best presentation, versus what a consumer actually wants. Imagine getting this huge box and, it's shipped with this, you ordered a head wrap and you got a styrofoam head now.
Yeah. And my first repeat customer, she was like, okay, I'm going to buy another one, but this time, please just keep the head. Keep the head.
That's awesome. So you're shipping, so you have all these SKUs, and was that, it created a bunch of complication. How many did you have to make to realize that was not sustainable?
Well, I didn't realize that it was an issue until maybe 3 or 4 months in from launch. And at that time, we probably had like 300 or 400 orders a month. And with me, I mean, I could sell, but I wasn't that good at it. So like at my machine, it might take me like an hour to make one of them. And consider there's like maybe 2 per order. I have like 800 to do in a month. It's just like, oh, wait, this isn't. And
right.
That's when I realized not only that, but there's nuances to selling things out of one piece of fabric, where like, okay, so say we make one style and it takes up a certain amount of fabric. Well, another style might take up less fabric. And we didn't think about the yields of the fabric and all of these are manufacturing things that if I had known, hindsight, obviously hindsight is 2020, but you run out of fabric faster than you thought, or then you got to go back to your supplier. Your supplier doesn't have that print anymore, and it causes all types of issues. So that's where things got complicated.
300 orders in a month, that's not insignificant. That's 10 orders a day. How did people find out, and how were they ordering? How did the popularity of it spread so quickly?
Well, some of my posts on Instagram started to go, I guess what we would call viral today. I didn't think anything of it because Instagram wasn't that hard to crack back in the day, but they did get a lot of traction organically on Instagram and on Facebook.
Love that. Yeah. I think that's interesting. There's 2 points to that. Going back to your point about, you didn't really have the experience running a factory back then. So there's all these things that you kind of make a mistake and then you learn from is the yield of the fabric. You don't know anything about that, but then, after the fact, you're kind of like, oh, that, and I think that is such a good lesson in just start, because you can't predict the next idea or the next challenge that you're going to have to overcome. And the only way that you become an expert is not by reading books, it's through experience. And so if you have an idea, you can't overthink it. You just kind of have to start, because if you are good and you're passionate and you really want to solve the problem that you're solving, then you'll figure out this answer to it. Or, just by sheer kind of will, you'll kind of brute force your way through, those challenges that you're having. And I think the second thing is that early on platforms, no matter where those platforms are, there are opportunities. And, like you said, you were early on Instagram, and I'm sure people saw early on TikTok. And before that, early on YouTube, whatever those platforms are that feel like they're emerging, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to try to get to the place where it isn't as crowded if you're just getting started, because, that in those places, you don't have as much noise, and the more established players don't really understand the medium yet. And so if you're building a company out there and you're, thinking about where you should start, what's the medium that the best, and what's the medium where there isn't as much competition or noise.
Right.
So you're going viral on Instagram, and you are, figuring out how to make these 300 orders times maybe 1 to 2 units a order. How did you solve that problem early on? What did you do? Obviously, you couldn't sew them all yourself.
No. The first step was to get some help. So, my mom came on. She was super helpful way in the beginning. And I hired people across the city. And really, it was like just a work from home contractor gig for them. People, I put out an ad on Indeed. I said, we just need people who know how to sew. And the pattern was so simple that it really wasn't difficult to find someone who could do it. So we, and really what they were doing is they were just sewing the base, dropping them off to me, and I would tie them, stitch them, and send them out. And so, basically they would show up for their interview. I would hand them the pattern, teach them how to make it, and they would come back with a finished one. I would say, okay, you got the job, and then we would get to work. So when the orders came in, we would run this report. We would say, okay, we need, 10 of this style, 10 of this style, 10 of this style, and I would just divvy it up to the 4 or 5 people we had sewing and pay them by piece.
And how far did that setup take you? How did that work? Did you have issues or challenges with product consistency? Maybe because the pattern was simple, you didn't. But what were some of the challenges in that with that setup?
There were some product quality challenges. So because everyone's on their own separate machine, we don't have control over the machine. There's different settings on the machine that need to be fine-tuned to make sure that the product is the best quality. And so someone might come back with the product and maybe there's a few stitches missed somewhere, or the thread is coming loose somewhere. And because we were under such pressure to ship the product quickly, we didn't have much choice but to take the product, repair it if necessary, and then ship it out. And so product quality wasn't as consistent as we would have liked. Also, of course, everyone has different skill levels. And then when you don't have someone directly supervising them, anything can come back once they're done with their work for the week. So those were some of the challenges that we faced that we were still wading through. Because our volume was a bit lower, I think it was easier to just sort of manage it. Like when things came back, I could say, hey, I need you to do this one again. And then you have to go back to the customer and say, hey, your order's delayed. And, there were things there that we were managing, but it was due to the fact that it wasn't a fully supervised team.
Mm-hmm. And how far into the company was it that you knew or how many years in, or, how many customers did you have, what volume that you knew in order for YGN to get to the next level that you had to open up the manufacturing facility? Or do you have to open up the factory?
I mean, I knew, I think it might have been 1 or 2 years in that it was necessary. And I started in New Jersey. I opened up a small office there for this reason, because it got to the point where, the orders were coming in so quickly that, sending the orders out to people to make and bring them back, that time, we didn't have that much time in order to get this done. And we just really needed a more seamless flow of production to get these orders out to our customers in a timely manner.
Got it. And so you opened up a small office in New Jersey. What was that process like, finding your first office space?
It was interesting. I mean, if you know anything about renting a commercial space, you do kind of need a little bit of course, credit. You need money. They need to trust that you can pay for a space, right? I didn't have any of those things. So, I found this little office space in like the oldest part of Trenton, and he had posted on some message board online that he was renting out a space. It was maybe for like $500 a month or something like that. And he just gave me a shot. And so it was a really, really small room. It was like maybe, I don't know, maybe it was less than this room, like 400 square feet of an office. And I put 3 sewing machines in there and 1 big table in the middle. And I hired 3 people and we just got to work.
Cool. And how long did you have that for?
I had that for a few months. And then my husband's job moved us out to Texas. So that posed a bit of a challenge for me, because I'm like, okay, well, who's going to manage my office? And so I ended up having, I thought about keeping it open, but ended up having to shut it down.
You just kind of get your manufacturing set up, and then you got to move to Texas with Sean. When you landed in Texas, how did you transition the business from living in New Jersey to moving to Dallas?
So I know we had pending orders at that time. And I think that what happened was I ended up just making them all. So anything that we had pending from New Jersey, I made all the rest of those orders. And then I said, well, maybe I could try to go with the manufacturer. And so that's what I did. I had some patterns that I had made. I knew nothing about the manufacturing process or what they would need from me. I tried, Googling it and all that. And it just I could not wrap my mind around it. But I found a couple of manufacturers who were going to give it a shot. Found one out in Oregon and I found one in Kentucky. So I flew out to both of them. And it was such an unorthodox process, because typically when you have apparel manufacturing, you have a design and a tech pack that you can just deliver to them and they can make it. And I didn't know how to do that. So I flew out there and on their sewing machine and I showed them how to.
At their sewing machine, at their factory.
Right, at their factory on their sewing. And, I handed them my big paper pattern. It was just thank God that they took a chance. So they did. And, what happened, we started working, but what happened is what typically happens when you don't have a tech pack and clear details of design. is that the products came back terrible, right? So it came back, some of them came back way too small, some of them came back improperly constructed and stuff like that. So eventually we got it together, but there were some quality control issues there for sure.
So you've diversified your factories. How long were you working with those two factories? And we now know that YGN makes everything under one roof today. What was that transition from having these outsourced factories to saying, okay, now we have to do it in-house. I got to do it myself?
Yeah, so there were a couple things. First, when you outsource, the product is far more expensive than when you make it yourself. They obviously have to pay for their overhead and their staff and all of that, and then they still have to make a profit. So we were paying a lot to make them piece by piece. The second thing was we had gotten a batch of wraps back. The entire batch was bad. And, it was a really, really big hit because, it was all the money I had. I sent the fabric. I took the money. I bought the fabric. I sent it out there. I made the purchase of them, making the product. I paid the invoice. And I had no money left. So, and you don't get your money back when you get a bad product. So, that's what happened. I said, okay, well, now I got to go back to doing it myself. So I hired people here in Dallas. This was the first time I hired people in Dallas. I had 3 people across the city making products, and we had to remake all of those orders and then ship them out.
Wow. And did that factory, did they, for any make good, they just said, sorry, that's it?
They just said, sorry, that was it. They didn't offer anything at that time.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting, again, this idea that there are all these moments that happen when you're trying to build that feel like we're dead or this is done, or I kind of pushed all of my chips into the pot. I'm all in and, it looks like game over. But in many cases, there are other options and they kind of force you to look at what worked and what didn't, and evolve the business based on that. So you jump back to that original setup that you had in Jersey. At that point, how many years were you running YGN? How old was the company at that time?
So this was in around 2018. I launched the company in 2016. So I guess it's 2 years in when this happened.
Yeah. So you've kind of gone through 3 manufacturing setups at that point, 2 years in. Then you kind of go back to the original setup that you had, which was, all right, well, I'm going to just, find these contractors to make the product. What did you learn from the first time around that you applied to that second time where you hired those contractors?
So this time I started with a bit of inventory. So the last time was fully made to order. And this time I would say, okay, can you make me 10 of these, 10 of these, 10 of these, and then I would put that inventory. It was small amounts of inventory, but I would put that inventory up online so that I could ship them.
So you're creating a little bit more of a buffer, right? So that you're not just going edge to edge. There's not so much risk as you're selling the product. Customers are ordering the product.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then, so you had that set up, and obviously there's a period of time between that setup and opening up the YGN HQ in Dallas. What was that transition like? How did you decide, all right, well, we've kind of hit the ceiling with this contractor setup. Now we need to have everyone under the same roof.
So we did that for about 1.5 years, and then we ended up at COVID. And I had made these masks that matched the head wraps, and I put one up online, and it went completely viral. And I didn't have enough hands to make all the orders that were coming in. And, it just got to the point where we needed more people. Now what I did was I went to a temp agency and I said, hey, I know it's COVID right now, but I need 10 people to make these masks for me. And I said, you got to find 10 people who have sewing machines. And then we called them all into the office. We taught them all at one time. And then everyone went back to their houses and made masks and head wraps. And so at that point, it was kind of working, except we were running into the same issues of quality control, and somebody decided they're not going to do their work this week, and we were missing a whole batch of fabric and product. There's just like it's really hard to manage things when it's not in one building, especially a production process. And so that's when, because the demand wasn't letting up. It wasn't like one surge when we had the one post. It was just like people were just coming and purchasing product. And so I said, it's just time. It's time to open a building and get it all under one roof.
Yeah. So during COVID, what was it like opening a factory in the midst of COVID? I'm sure that must have been scary and hard. What was that process?
Yeah, so the COVID was a bizarre time in general. So it was just like, you're trying to navigate all these random rules that were set up. Okay, your machines have to be 6 feet apart, and everyone's station has to have hand sanitizer, and everyone has to be wearing a mask. And, we had all these restrictions around what we could do. And so we ended up finding a space, and it probably was because it was in COVID that they allowed me to have this building. But we found this little building here in Dallas that had just enough room for 10 machines 6 feet apart. So that's what we did. We put them in there, and then everyone came in and started working.
And were those the people who were already working for you remotely, or did you find new people to come into the space?
Some of them were the same people. And we also put out an Indeed post where a few more people showed up. So I had a team of about 8 people total that were making the product in-house.
And that's the space that we have today. And how long have we been in that space for?
We have been in that space for, I guess it's been since 2019. So 4 years now.
4 years now. Right. And it's kind of crazy to think it's been that long. It doesn't really feel like that long. But yeah, half the life of YGN, we've been in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And even in this space, we've expanded, because we started in one building and it expanded out to 3. And so it's when I think of 4 years, I'm thinking of it in phases, because we had that first little tiny building, and then 3 months later we expanded into the second building, and then we were in this third building. And you just think of the business in these phases that it goes through.
There's a funny, just kind of incremental 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that with every iteration, you learn another thing that you can take with you to whatever that next step up is. Right. Now that you've run a factory for, I guess now it's 4 years, proper, with 4 walls, a bunch of people, and you mentioned earlier that outsourcing is expensive, and I assume that you're just talking about outsourcing in the US. Is it as expensive as outsourcing to China or to, somewhere else? What are the differences between outsourcing in the US versus, other places? Is it less expensive to outsource to other countries?
It is less expensive to outsource to other countries. It is not less expensive than doing it in-house. So if you know how, and the reason most people don't do it in-house is because most people don't know how to sew, and it's really hard to run a factory. These are not easy things to do. So that's probably the reason why most people do outsource. And that's completely understandable. But no, it's not. I mean, no matter how you turn it, you're going to pay if you end up outsourcing the product.
So how do Nike and Gildan and all these massive companies, how do they outsource and justify it or say these are the costs? What's the difference between Nike and YGN?
Well, I mean, they have the luxury of doing things at scale. They technically own these factories. So, and as I was sourcing some fabric down in El Salvador, I visited some of Gildan's factories and some of, Walmart's factories. It's a factory in itself, but everything they make is Walmart stuff. So it's like they have this benefit of basically owning the entire building and getting the pricing that they want out of it because they have guaranteed business out of them.
Got it. So even though companies are saying they're outsourcing, they're not really outsourcing. They're just offshoring the manufacturing, and it's almost like a subsidiary, kind of like a Foxconn makes all of the iPhones.
Right.
Apple does the majority of business with Foxconn, and then we have other clients. What are some of the benefits of outsourcing? Most people are not going to run a factory, but what are some of the benefits of that setup?
So the benefit of that is you don't have the headache of running your own factory. So, it is a headache. So there are things like, just maintaining a building is a job in itself. There is payroll for all of your team. There's making sure you have all the materials you need, and there are so many different things that are managed that unless you have someone who really knows what they're doing in-house, it's probably best to just pay the cost per unit to outsource it, especially if you can find a good manufacturer.
Yeah. And, I know we face this is that there are certain seasons that are lighter, and factories are focused on utilization of the factory and of the people in that factory and of the space, and added overhead, when you run a factory, because if you're just ordering inventory, you just buy that inventory and you might overbuy, but that's a one-time cost. The factory, it's a ongoing cost.
Right. Exactly. There's just overhead that sometimes if you don't have a buffer, it can become a problem.
Yeah. We've talked about consistency in product, reliability in the people who work at the factory, ensuring that you can continue to make the product in a way that meets the customer demands. What are some other benefits that we've had that you've seen for YGN specifically?
Well, for us specifically, because we make and ship our product out of the same building, it gives us the freedom to keep our inventory very lean. So what happens when you're purchasing from a manufacturer or you outsource your products, you have to order those products in bulk, and you have to forecast what you think you'll sell that year. Right. So that can sometimes cause issues with inventory. You have all this inventory on the books and sometimes you don't always sell it. And that can be a costly thing to have to manage. And so because we make product in-house and ship it in-house, we're able to keep our inventory very lean. We keep a couple of units in stock. And if we see there's demand in a certain area, we can increase production in that area or reduce production in any area. So it gives us kind of more flexibility around how we manage our inventory. And it gives us the ability to quickly get things to market and ship them.
Mm-hmm. When you say quickly get things to market, what is the process of an idea that you might have to us shipping it? How does that work?
So typically, if I have an idea for a new product, it goes down a couple different paths. So if it's a product that we're already making, we make head wraps, we make swim turbans. If I say, hey, let's do a new color, then I will just source that fabric from a fabric supplier, and then we can bring it in, make a sample, take a picture, and the next day, literally, it can be online and selling and shipping to people. Mm-hmm. And so that type of flexibility is honestly gold, because newness works. It works to bring new customers in. It works to bring previous customers back. And so it's a tool that we have that we can ship and market new products pretty quickly. Now, if it's a new product, I still design, create patterns for, and teach our team how to make our products. And so if it comes out of my head, I can go to a machine, I can make the product, I can talk to my production manager. We can collaborate on how to do it best for production. And within maybe 2 weeks, we can have it on the website and shipping. And so it just gives us flexibility and ease of movement around how we launch and market products.
Yeah, there's a lot of lead time. There's a lot of costs to, outsourcing. If you have the resources to do it, starting lean. And I think this really does apply to any business, honestly, is you can outsource whatever, whether you're making caps or whether you're writing software or whether you can outsource that work. And at the same time, when you have teams or people in-house that are close to the business that are working on the business's behalf, it does give you that flexibility to move more quickly, to have ideas more quickly, to move faster. And I think as you're telling your story, there's an immense amount of value as a founder, as a visionary CEO, to be able to sit down at the machine and say, this is how we should make it. Whether you're going and you're talking to your team internally, but you're also going to a factory and you're trying to vet them and understand whether they can make what you need them to make. You having that core competency certainly is helpful, and it's a really powerful thing. I would imagine also because the team knows that it's not just like you're telling them what to do. You're part of the team. You're thinking similar to how the team thinks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's definitely been valuable in, working with outside, manufacturers, going from working with outside manufacturers to bringing everything in-house. It almost allows us to build a moat around ourselves because we can really truly develop and continuously improve the product without having to spread that information everywhere as we outsource it.
Mm-hmm. If someone's making it in the US, they're probably not skimping on quality because there's a pride to that and there's a control to that.
And they also don't have the luxury to skimp on quality because they can't skimp on wages. So, I mean, if you're paying, at least minimum wage in the US, you're going to have to get decent quality out of it because that's the only that will warrant the price that you're going to have to charge your customer.
Yeah. We do see that. We do talk about this, is that there's a lot of companies that try to undercut YGN, and that's an important aspect of the values that we hold as a company, is that there has to be value, or I use that word again, but there has to be, it's quality. And, we want every customer who comes and purchases a YGN product to know that we stand behind it and we're proud of it. Every wrap or turbine or accessory that goes out of these doors, we're proud of that product that goes out of the doors. So talking about that, what today is our quality control process, especially because we so rapidly turn over inventory. We have it more recently, launch new products. But when we launch new products, what's that quality control? How do we think about controlling the quality of the product and ensuring that it's amazing when it leaves our door?
So all of our products go through quality inspection before they leave the production floor. We've got a quality team, and much to my chagrin, many of the products that come out of production, I say that because, that's materials and production and things like that goes all the way through the process and it gets to quality control. And if they say it's not passing, it's not passing. And so that's what we have. We have a team that kind of buffers between our shipping team and our production floor, and they check quality and then they pack it up and get it ready to ship.
And through that quality process, how do we iterate on product based on that feedback or based on what we're seeing from quality control or from customers?
Well, I mean, we talked about other benefits of producing in-house, but quality is also one of them. There are many companies that will, produce their products, they'll have a fitting, and then they have to place a large order of that product. And if they miss something in that fitting, a lot of people are going to complain about that one style. And we see it on different websites, Shein, Fashion Nova, and you'll see in the reviews, hey, this these pants fit small. They fit too small. They just like the fabric feels weird or whatever. Those are things that if you produce in-house, you can catch them quickly and pivot. And so that's what happened specifically with our swim turban. I mean, how that we did try them on. We tried them on in the pool, but there's just not much that you can do to mimic what happens when something goes out to a larger scale of the general public. And so we did find some things in quality that we needed to change. And we were able to do that fairly quickly. And, we changed the size of the cap mid-season. And then we also changed some of the materials within the cap mid-season. And we were able to do that and just sort of pivot so that it didn't affect such a large swath of the customer base.
Yeah. Part of the fourth function, these are unique products. They are everywhere. There are a handful of companies that make them at scale, YGN being one of them. And a lot of the products that we make, they haven't been made before. Having that flexibility to say, okay, we're going to put this out, we think our community, our customers are going to like this. And if they don't, then we can kind of just not, and then at the same time, if they do, we can scale up more quickly. Early on, you did these limited runs of batches. How does the factory help you kind of do these batches? And I guess from a customer perspective, how do you think about how to keep customers happy with these limited batches?
So limited batches actually started when I was still producing from home. And the way that they started was that I was actually buying fabric from local fabric stores. I wasn't getting them from big fabric suppliers. And local fabric stores typically sell what you call remnant rolls. So what they'll do is they'll go to a trade show, and if like a large Louis Vuitton factory says, hey, we've got this leftover roll of fabric, they'll sell it there at the trade show. And so they've got this one roll of fabric that they can go back and sell yard by yard in their fabric shop. I was buying from the fabric shop. So what I was getting was the last 50 yards of fabric. And so I had to produce them in limited batches because like sometimes I would get 10 yards at a time. I'm like, okay, I got 10 wraps, y'all want? And so that was how that started. But it was something that allowed my customers to be continuously excited about coming back and getting a product before it sells out. And so even now, sometimes we'll order sample yards of fabrics because we're like, okay, let's try out this color. Let's try out this fabric. We're working out a new style. And we'll have a roll of 10 yards left in our factory. And it allows us to not waste those rolls and not waste those yards and provide something that's new and exciting for our customers.
Yeah. Because everything is handmade, it's almost like one shot. If it's small batch, there's an odd that we're not bringing it back. And, it's almost like a capsule, snapshot in time. And we made it and it's gone. And it's gone because we either, chose not to make it anymore or because that fabric is gone. And so for us, it's even more special than that. It's not like we're going to sell everything that we make forever, every style, every color. These are kind of snapshots in time. Why don't we just wrap this conversation, no pun intended, with just kind of talking about the future of the factory and the future of what you'd like to see, product-wise come to life.
Yeah, so right now the factory is kind of in a transitional place. Like we have gone through a couple of really like kind of rocky years. And I think we're now stabilizing again. We've come to a really comfortable place around inventory and how we produce and the size of our team. And so now that we're comfortable again, I can focus on the feedback that I'm getting from customers around new products that they want. Now, I've been hearing that customers want shower caps. And, I've kind of just been wrapping my mind around, okay, like what kind of shower cap would we design that would be different from what's already on the market? And so, and also, our men are saying, hey, I've got nothing. I can't sleep in your halo turban. What do I sleep in? So I'm hearing the feedback that's coming back from our customers. And, now that we're in a more comfortable place, I can focus on bringing those products to life again.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exciting. And if you're listening and if you're a YGN customer, please send us your feedback. Send it into nature of the business at yougonatural.com, or send it into our support email. Tag us on social media, message us on Instagram. Send us your feedback, because we do listen to that. And, we want to create products. Our customers have always pulled YGN forward by sharing with us what you want. Yeah, it does help us frame what we do next. I love this conversation because, the factory, as you talked about before, is such a living, breathing organism, and it's core to YGN and who we are. It drives our innovation. It allows us to be able to deliver product to our customer base, who before this, there weren't a lot of accessories geared towards, curly, kicky haircuts in our market. We're really proud to say that we make all of our products by hand, and they're all made in the US. Anything else you want to add, Monique, before we jump?
No, I don't think I have anything else.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for listening. And what will we talk about next time?
Good question. What will we talk about next time?
Well, running a factory costs money, right? Building a brand costs money. So why don't we talk about, if you're Monique from 8 years ago and you're just getting started as an entrepreneur, what options do you have to capitalize your business? And so with that, I think that'll be next week's conversation, is how do you fund your business at different stages of your growth?
Sounds like fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for listening, guys, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.